Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and I am going to be doing a rant review, the first one of this year I believe, on The Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This book, why? Please can someone tell me why this book is so highly rated on Goodreads and why everybody and their mother is raving about it? I don't understand. I genuinely do not understand how this has one of the highest Goodreads ratings that I have ever seen. This review is going to be very disordered. I'm not really going to structure it like I typically do. I'll probably just remember things as I go along. But if you liked this book, this is no hate towards you. I can't believe I even have to say this, but that is my disclaimer. That just because I didn't like this book, it doesn't mean that I think that you're a bad person if you did like it. Doesn't mean that I don't think that, you're not smart or anything like that. At the end of the day, we are all welcome to like the books that we like. We're also all welcome to dislike the books that we don't like. And for me, this is one of those books that I personally cannot fathom how people could enjoy this. But if you did, good for you. So I just want to say that. Without further ado, let's jump in. So if you haven't heard about this book, and I don't know how you possibly couldn't have, this is a book about a young girl. I think she's in her 20s. I think she's 20. She joins a school to basically train to be a dragon rider. The crux is that there are these games that each of the students has to partake in, and people can basically die at any moment, so the stakes are supposed to be really high. Each student is at risk at any point. The only time that they can't be killed is when they're asleep, and that's because it's in this rule book. But otherwise, anybody is fair game. Apart from when they're sleeping, anybody is fair game. Wherever they are, whoever they are, they're fair game. So we follow a girl called Violet. Now she is somebody who has a lot of physical health problems. She has kind of like weak bones and she's quite small and she's not very suited to physical fighting for that reason. The average person, if they were to get hit or hurt, they would maybe take a couple of days to recover, but she takes weeks, sometimes even longer than that, because she's very frail in her body. So I thought that representation of somebody who isn't strong and, physically strong, I should say, it was quite good. I quite like the fact that we got somebody who is quite different in that regard. I feel like a lot of fantasy characters, specifically female fantasy characters, are shown as the strongest person in the room, and it's like, come on, like, is that really reasonable? And she's like killing men who are like 3 times her size and have been fighting for like twice as long as her. And look, I'm all for a strong physical woman, but at least make it make sense, right? And I think in this scenario, it did make sense. I think it was good to have somebody who had a kind of predisposition to not be physically strong. So that was one of the things that it had going for it. Violet as a character is so bland. This is my problem with fantasy romance books, is the female characters are so dry, they're so bland, their personality is like one thing, and her personality in this is her hair. The amount of times that we get references to her hair is just absurd, because I think it's at the ends of her hair, it's silver tipped, if I remember correctly. It comes up so often, not just by her but other characters, that it's like, okay, so this is her personality now, is her hair. And apart from that, we don't know anything about this girl. We don't know anything about this young woman. We don't know anything about who she is. I mean, we know her family are like quite powerful. Her mother is a commander. She's very senior in, I guess, what is the equivalent of government. They have a really bad relationship. She has a brother who passed away before the events of this book, or allegedly passed away before the events of this book. And she has an older sister called Mira, if I remember correctly, and she's like super strong, like the best in her class, and like everybody respects her and kind of fears her. And that's what we know. That's what we know. So we know that about her family. We know that she has a physical disability, and we know that she has silver-tipped hair, and that's it. We don't know anything about this girl beyond that. At least in, ACOTAR, we knew that Feyre liked to paint, and that was her personality. but at least she had something outside of just being this, you know, main female character. With this one, that's literally all we know about her. Everything we know about her is either about her family or it's a physical attribute. And that to me is absolutely terrible character work. Because if I don't know anything about this character and I don't know anything about what she likes, what she dislikes, what she stands for, if I don't know any of these things, I am never going to buy into this character. And bear in mind, we are in her head for every single chapter aside from the last one. So it didn't make sense to me. I had no sense of connection to this person because everything about her was superficial and she was just so boring. She was so boring to read and be in her head. She tries to be this kind of very quirky, funny, but like, no, the humor was terrible. So bad. Like, when you're in a book like this, a first person perspective book where she is the only POV that we follow, again, apart from that last chapter, there has to be something. And there was nothing. There is nothing redeeming about this character at all. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the main male love interest. So Violet has two love interests. We have Dane, her best friend from when they were children, and he is just the most boring, wettest character I have ever read. Just so flat. I mean, he's basically shaping up to be the Tamlin of the book. He's basically shaping up to be the one that loves her, but loves the old version of her, doesn't like this new feisty version of her. He's trying to hold her back and he's trying to stop her from doing the things that she wants to do. She's almost setting him up to be one of the villains of the book, and given the way that the book ended, that is definitely where I see this going. Without a doubt, we're going to get a showdown between Dane and Violet at some point, probably in the next book, if not that one, the book after that, because from what I understand, this is going to be a 5-book series. But I just, again, he didn't really have any reasons beyond the fact that she has a physical disability. The thing that I find really hard to believe is by the time that we get kind of halfway through the book, she's achieved a lot. She has gone through a lot of the trials, a lot of the tasks that they have to do. And she's obviously struggled, like a lot of the other people have struggled, but she's survived and a lot of other people have died. And yet he still holds on to this notion that she can't be a writer and that she has to be one of the academics. And it's like, Dane, come on, mate. Like, come on. You can clearly see that she's doing all right. Why don't you help her instead of actually trying to hold her back and put doubt in her head? And I get why she's trying to do this. She's trying to make him into one of the villains of the book. But it was for such stupid reasons, such stupid surface level reasons that I couldn't buy into his motivation. And I just hated every single scene that he was in as a result. I mentioned earlier, just literally like 10 seconds ago, that we have these riders and that's what Violet is training to be. But there are other disciplines in the school. So the other disciplines are like healing, so you can be a healer, which is what her older brother was. You can also be like an academic, I forgot what they call them, like a scribe. So they're the people who learn about the history and they advise on like tactics and strategy. That's what her dad was, who is not alive at the start of this book. He died because of events that happened before the book. And she was training to be a scribe. And her mother forced her into the rider path because it would look bad on her because she is a commander. Like, think about that. She knows her daughter has a physical disability, and yet she still forces her to do the most physical path, being a rider, because she's worried that it will bring shame to her family. Despite the fact that her son was a healer and her husband was a scribe. Make it make sense. It doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't make sense. We kind of get this tension as a result between her and her mother. Every single time her mother is in a scene with Violet, they barely interact, they barely communicate, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. I have a feeling her mother knows something about her that we are unaware of, and that's why she treats her the way she treats Violet. But she treats her horribly, and it doesn't make sense. Like, it really does not make sense. So I'm waiting for a reveal that we'll probably get in book 2 or book 3. The next character that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to focus quite a bit on characters, because the characters, you know, they kind of are a big focus of the book, obviously. The next character I'm going to talk about is Zayden. Zayden is the main love interest. He is the son of one of the rebel leaders who fought against Violet's mother in the war, and Zayden's father killed Violet's brother, if I remember correctly. So there's a lot of kind of tension there. Before she enters the school to start training or to start the first task, her sister Mira gives her a warning to stay away from him. She says he will kill you. And the fact that the author decides to focus on that so much in the first chapter, you know straight away as the reader that he's not going to try and kill her and that they're going to end up together. And that's exactly what happens. So it's just, be a bit more tactful, writers, please. I don't need everything to be Baker level of complexity, but like, please try and not spell it out to us as obvious as that. The brother, Brennan, I think is his name. Again, so much focus on his death at the start of the book that he's obviously alive at the end of this book. And what is the big reveal at the end? It's that Brennan is alive and Zayden has been working with him. Didn't predict that from page 1. Like, come on. Like, give us a bit of credit. You know, you don't have to spell every single little thing out. We're not stupid. And I just can't believe that people were like genuinely surprised by that. Like, I'm not one of these people who likes to generally predict what I'm reading, like what happens at the end. But when you make it so obvious, it is hard for me not to. It is really, really hard for me not to. I just didn't like it. Absolutely hated it, as a matter of fact. So now going back to Zayden, Zayden is just, you know, he reminds me of Rhysand from ACOTAR. He has shadow magic. I don't understand why every good-looking main love interest has to have shadow magic, like, genuinely. The way that he is described is exactly the same to Rhysand. And I had a look at some character after I finished the book and they look identical. I just don't understand, like, do we not accept that there are other types of people and they look differently? And yeah, like, I just don't understand, like, why we keep getting the same types of male love interest and female characters as well. Because Violet is definitely just another version of Feyre, another version of all the other SJM female characters, or that awful character in the worst series to this day that I've still ever read by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Forgotten her name, forgotten the name of the series because it's just that bad. But she's very similar to the main character in that. No personality, nothing redeeming, and Zayden is the same. Absolutely the same. Their whole relationship as well is based on vanity, and it's based on physical attributes. They don't actually have any meaningful conversations. They don't actually have any conversations of substance. Every single conversation is her thinking that he's going to kill her, and then him making some snarky comment and calling her the most dumbest nickname I've ever heard, called Violence. Doesn't even make sense because she's not even violent, and I'm pretty sure she's a pacifist. That's the limit of their interactions. We don't actually get any meaningful conversations between them about their family, about their suffering, about the challenges that they had. You know, they both lost important people to them. They could have bonded over that, but not once do they talk about that with each other. It's just purely physical. And sure, I mean, there's nothing wrong with necessarily having two people interact in that way, but when you're trying to get us to buy into this couple who are destined to be together, come on, do better. Like, do better. One part of this book that I really didn't like was the forced proximity trope. I hate that trope. And this book is just a book of tropes that I hate in general. But the forced proximity trope, just really don't like it. Essentially, when Violet bonds to her dragon, which is obviously the biggest, baddest dragon in the world, didn't see that coming, she ends up bonding with a dragon who has a mate, and that mate is Zayden's dragon. They can't be away from each other. The two dragons can't be away from each other for more than 3 days. So that means that these two are now bonded together forever. because if they are away from each other, the two dragons, it will impact the riders, because if the dragons get hurt, or even worse, get killed, the rider will also get killed. So the bond between the dragon and the rider is really strong. But weirdly enough, if a rider dies, the dragon doesn't die. Make it make sense. Like, at least make it go both ways. Like, it's so stupid. The other thing about Violet is that she doesn't only bond with one dragon, the biggest, baddest dragon in the world. She also bonds with another dragon, who at this point is a featherling, I think it is, which basically means that it's a baby dragon and it hasn't fully grown. But I guarantee you, by the end of this series, Andana, I think is her name, will be the biggest, baddest dragon. Like, I have no doubt about it. There'll be some big, huge skill that she can do that no other dragon can do. And then we have Violet with two of the biggest, baddest dragons in the world. Like, I'm calling it right now. Like, it's just so stupid. So stupid. Next, I am going to talk about the writing. If you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at my iPad where I have my ebook copy, naturally. And I actually highlighted some stuff. I actually highlighted quite a lot. Now, one of the things that I really hated about this author's writing is the constant use of, I don't know what the name of it is because I've just forgotten it. Like, it's literally just gone out of my head. But it's when an author will use full stops after each word to emphasize what they're saying. So as an example, I could be talking about something and I will say, and let's say somebody's bothering me, I could respond by saying, stop doing that, right? To emphasize, please stop doing that. I mean, you could also just say, please stop doing that, but you might want to over-enunciate and over-emphasize those words to make a point. I kid you not, I highlighted every single one that this author uses in this book, and I think I'm not going to bother counting them now, but there must be over 30, just scrolling through. Like, what the hell? Get out, Lieutenant. Stay away from him. It's just so bad. I'm just about there. I'll read one more. Get your dagger. Like, it's so stupid. It is just so stupid. Why? She's 20 years old, not a 12-year-old who's just hit puberty. Like, come on. I used it there, but there it makes sense. Using it 2-3 times in the entire book to make a point, fine. Using it in every single chapter, sometimes multiple times in a chapter, is stupid, and it makes your character sound really dumb. Again, if she was like a teenager going through puberty, fine. She's 20 years old, and Zayden's even older, and Zayden does it a few times. He must be like 23, I think. And yet he does it too, and it's just so stupid. Make it make sense, please. The writing is very juvenile. It reminds me of Almond Trout in that way. It's so basic, but not in a good way. I've talked about simple writing before on my channel. Simple writing is good. I'm in favor of simple writing. But there's simple writing and there's basic writing. And I kid you not, I could write a better book than this. Genuinely. And I am not a professional writer. The thing that I write the most is emails. And this is just so poorly written. I promise you, if you gave me the same plot and the same characters, I could write a better book. Like, genuinely. It's just very juvenile, very immature. Bear in mind, again, these are 20-year-old characters, you know, in their early 20s, mid-20s, and they just talk so stupidly. Like, I just can't get over it. Like, I'm scrolling through as I'm saying it right now, and there's just so many things. Just so many problems with the writing. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is just some of the things that didn't really make sense to me. The other thing in terms of just the kind of really childish nature of this book is, like, I'll give you an example. This is a conversation between Mira and Violet, and they're talking about her going into this school. So for the cadets to enter the school, they have to go through their first challenge, which many people die in that first challenge because it's very dangerous. They basically have to go over a bridge, but there's no railing. It's very slippery because it's raining. It's very dangerous. People die. And bear in mind, this is like an hour before she's supposed to do that. She's really scared, or allegedly really scared. Her sister allegedly is really worried about her. And this is what they talk about. Something I designed, she explains, tucking my bread painfully tight against my scalp. I had it specially made for you with tane scales sewn in, so be careful with it. She's talking about an armour that she made from her dragon scales for Violet so that she can be protected. Dragon scales? I jerk my head back to look at her. How? Tane is huge. I happen to know a rider whose powers can make big things very small. A devious smile plays across her lips, and smaller things, ... much, much bigger. I'm not going to say anything else. It's just why. Another quote that I tagged was, my breezy pants are exchanged for leather ones that hug every curve. I never really understood this. Why would you wear leather pants that cling to you when you're going into battle? Like, I understand wearing fitted things because you don't want them to like fly around in the wind, but why would you specifically wear leather? Leather is like the most impractical piece of material to wear, especially on your legs, because it sticks to your legs. And if you're in battle, you're going to be sweating a lot and moving a lot. And when you sweat in leather, it constricts the leather and makes it very uncomfortable. Why? Just why? Like, again, make it make sense. Another one was this one. This is the only quadrant at Basgiath that doesn't accept conscripts, only volunteers. So they're talking about the rider discipline at the school. As I mentioned, there's a couple of different disciplines. And for the rider one, because the chance of death is so high, they only take volunteers as part of the process. But that doesn't make sense because she is literally forced by her mother. So there must be some way for the school to be able to tell whether somebody has been forced versus actually being volunteered, because otherwise you could just force anybody to enter. Like, it doesn't make sense. That's a plot hole. Like, it literally makes no sense. And then there's a bit straight after that where she was like, Violet was like, I was more like voluntold. Firstly, dumb joke. And secondly, there are numerous opportunities that she is given during her time at the start where she could have defected and gone to the scribe quadrant. Yes, her mother would have been angry, but she would have been protected for a few years before she would have to deal with that. So the fact that, like, now she's trying to play the victim, like, get over yourself, Violet. Like, there were literally multiple opportunities for you to go to the scribe quarter. Don't complain about it. Don't complain about it. The other thing that I will mention is the kind of constant focus on Zayden being this, like, really hot guy. And there's this one bit where she says, he's the most exquisite man I've ever seen. This is the guy that she's supposed to stay away from. Like, this is what I mean about the leave it to the imagination of the reader a little bit. Like, you don't have to make it so obvious to us that this is the person that she's going to end up with. I just really don't like it. The other thing that Violet does, again, I told you this was not going to be particularly ordered. I'm just remembering, like, all my notes now from what I kind of highlighted. There's this thing that Violet does when she is nervous. She will recite parts of books that she remembers or that she's learned from. And this is just a perfect excuse for the author to info dump on us. Because, like, the like in the first challenge, she, like, says all this stuff about dragons, and it's like, well, obviously that's going to be important later on, and naturally it does become important later on. Early on in the book as well, like near the start of the book, we get one of the first interactions between Dane and Violet. This is what Dane says. But a year doesn't change that. I still think of you as my best friend. I'm still Dane, and this time next year you will still be Violet. We will still be us. And then following the next couple of chapters, that is evidently not going to happen. And who would have thought that, right? Another one, again, furthering my point about being just super focused on physicality. The guys are mostly shirtless because they think shirts give their opponents something to grab onto. Personally, I'm not arguing with their logic, just enjoying the view. Firstly, imagine if the inverse of that was said. Like, imagine if this was a guy POV and we were focusing on women, there would be uproar about that. So thanks for the double standard. And then secondly, you are literally at risk at any given moment, and that is what she decides to focus on. Guys, like, name me a dumber character. Apart from the Jennifer L. Armentrout one, name me a dumber character. I just cannot understand why people love this book so much. Let me just have a look. Oh yeah, there was another bit that I just thought was really stupid. So there's this bit where the cadets have to parade in front of the dragons. The reason why they do this is so that the dragons can learn about their personality and just get a sense of how they interact with other people, and, you know, just kind of see whether they jive with them. And this is one of the things that they talk about as they're walking in front of dragons. Bear in mind, at the start of this book, we are constantly told that dragons are very, very dangerous. And if you say the wrong thing, if you do the wrong thing, they will kill you. They will just burn you on the spot. And this is what they talk about. I'm just wondering how one of you got all the good traits and the other one looks like she got the leftovers. His gaze skims down my body. Full body shudder, gross. You're an asshole. I flip him the middle finger. They are doing that as they walk in front of dragons. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. These people are so stupid. Bear in mind, Violet is positioned to us as the smartest person in this book. And there is a lot of stuff that she just does not know that anybody who has studied history would know. So, like, as an example, we get some, like, information on Zayden and his dragon and, like, his family and why they were rebelling against her mother, the commander, and her boss, who is, like, the ruler of Basgiath. This is basic stuff that she should know. This is basic stuff that she would have read in a history book. And she doesn't know any of it. She's so stupid. And yet we're told that she had the potential to be one of the best scribes who have ever lived. And yet she doesn't know basic history. Like, she doesn't know basic history. Please make it make sense. There are so many inaccuracies in this book, just in terms of how the characters are, in terms of how the book plays out, the plot, certain things. There's just so many contradictions. And I just don't understand how a book like this got published. Like, I just don't understand. Like, I have to say, authors, like, if you're an author and you're worried about trying to, you know, get your book published, this should give you some hope. And it should also show to you that the publishing industry is broken and it's not fair. It's based on pure buzz and hype, not actual good content. It doesn't take a lot, in my opinion, these days to get a book successful, in the sense that with the right level of hype and the right buzzwords and the right people backing it, you can manufacture hype around something. And this is the perfect example of that. The most recent Sarah J. Maas books, slightly different because obviously she's a very successful writer, but those later SJM books are, I've talked about this many times before, they are absolutely shockingly bad. But because she has this backing, we're now able to create this kind of manufactured sense of, oh my god, her books are amazing, when in actual fact they're pieces of shit. This is the biggest piece of shit that I have read in a long time. Makes me angry. It makes me feel as well for the people who have genuinely written good books. And this isn't a case of this book wasn't for me. This book is an objectively poorly written book. The writing style, the dialogue, the characters, the contradictions, the plot holes, it's just shocking. It's just absolutely shocking. The last thing that I'm going to talk about, because I have no clue how long this video is, but I'm fully aware that I've just been ranting, and I've definitely missed stuff out, but one of the last things that I'll mention is at the end of the book, Zayden and Violet have a huge argument, and that obviously leads to them breaking apart, and there's now lots of distrust, and the next book is going to be about Zayden trying to build trust with her again, and inevitably we'll probably find out that they're mates or some equivalent of mates, and they'll end up happily together, obviously, because let's endorse toxic relationships, right? There is this thing that Zayden keeps away from Violet, which is that he is working with the enemies of Basgiath. And that is the rebel faction that her brother is actually the leader of, which she doesn't know at that point. All she knows is that Zayden has been working with the rebels and she sees that obviously as a betrayal. The thing is, Zayden was going to tell her, but he didn't tell her because of Dane's ability. So each rider develops an ability. Zayden's is shadow power. Violet's eventually becomes lightning power, which is very similar to Red Queen. Her mother's is like storm power, like she can control storms and all of that. Dane, her no longer best friend, it has the ability to read a person's memories if he touches their face. Zayden doesn't want to tell her what is happening with this rebel faction because he's worried that Dane will find out if he touches her, because you know, they've been friends basically for most of the book. That is a totally valid reason not to tell someone something. Completely valid reason. And yet Violet is so unforgiving of this. I mean, maybe she'll be more forgiving of it in the next book, but she sees it as like the ultimate betrayal, and it's like, grow up. Like, he had a perfectly valid reason for not telling you, and his reason was actually backed up, because there's this bit that happens at the end where each kind of wing, they call them wings, and the fourth wing is the one that she's in with Zayden. The fourth wing gets sent on a kind of mission, and they basically get set up to be murdered because Dane realizes that something is going on because he reads Violet's memories. And so Zayden is absolutely right in doing what he does, and is even validated by that because of what happens. And yet she just can't find it in herself to actually, you know, use logic to understand that position. Yes, you might not be happy with it, but at least try to understand. She's just such an idiot. Like, such an idiot. So, yeah, that was it. I hated everything about this book. I gave it a 1.5 stars. The only reason why I gave it a 0.5 stars is because I actually quite liked the dragon. I liked her main dragon, who is, his name is Ten, if I remember correctly. I read him as this kind of really posh old British man. I don't know if that's true, because I think the characters are American based on the way that they speak. But I read the dragon in an old posh British man's voice, and he's very sarcastic and dry, and the only thing that I enjoyed about this book, everything else was so stupid. Like, genuinely stupid. It was very poorly written. I genuinely don't understand why people like this book so much. From what I do know, I spoke to some people about it on Reddit, and they were saying that a lot of people who don't typically read fantasy like this book because it's quite soft on the fantasy side, which is definitely true. But that aside, it's just a poorly written book. It's an objectively poorly written book. I mean, I barely scraped the surface with all the things I talked about. Like, there are hundreds of things. I don't know if you can see me scrolling, but there are hundreds of things that I tagged that just didn't make sense. So, and there were a lot of typos as well, which for a published book is absolutely shocking and unacceptable. So yeah, thankfully I didn't pay for this book. My friend gifted it to me, so there's that. At least I didn't pay like £15 for it. I would have been very unhappy if I had to pay for it myself. I mean, I feel bad for my friend paying their money, but I think she'll like this review, so it's for you. She knows who she is. But yeah, am I going to read the second book? Probably, mainly because I want to see how many of my predictions come true. But I think this might become a case of the whole Jennifer L. Armentrout situation, where I read the first 2 books, tried to read the third one, and then I stopped. So I will give it a go, and I'll probably, depending on how predictable that one is, I'll probably stop at that point. But yeah, I found out about this book randomly a few weeks ago, and then I didn't watch any YouTube reviews. I haven't watched any YouTube reviews as of yet, apart from one. And but from when you YouTube search Fourth Wing reviews, they're all positive. And the ridiculously high rating, which I think is like 4.8 or something on Goodreads, I saw that obviously, and there's like thousands of reviews, tens of thousands of reviews. I was expecting something to be good about this book, and there is nothing. Literally nothing. So if you want a more objective view of this book, because I did want to like it, I actually really like the premise of the book. I like the whole idea of being in a dragon school and like have to learn how to kind of work with your dragon and all of that. Like, that sounds really cool to me. And it's now, as a result, made me want to read some more like dragon fantasy books, and I bought a few recently. But the execution, the characters, the plot, none of it worked. So yeah, I'm gonna stop there because my blood pressure has probably increased as I have been ranting about this book. Dumbest book I've ever read. That's not true. Second dumbest book I've ever read after the Jennifer L. Armentrout series. Is it as bad as Crescent City 2? Actually, I don't know. They're both pretty bad. I should probably do a ranking of this at some point, like ranking the worst books I've ever read. If that's of interest, let me know. I hope you enjoyed this one. Again, if you like this book, more power to you. I'm happy for you. Seriously, I'm happy for you. But I'm looking at this as a reviewer, and I'm looking at this from the perspective of, is this a well-written book as well as did I enjoy it? I didn't enjoy it, and it was very poorly written, in my opinion, obviously. So let me know what you think down below. Be respectful. If you're not respectful, again, I will block people. But if you are respectful and you want to have a genuine dialogue about this book, I'd be very happy to do that. I'm always excited to have these types of conversations. So yeah, I'll see you down in the comments. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe, as always. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.